Get it started. It's 4:30 on the dot. Mr. Song, are we recording? We're good to go? Excellent. All right. Well, I think, first of all, thank you all for being here. We're very excited about this new initiative that we've had a chance to kind of collaborate between the two schools on. Next slide, please, sir. So today, I think before I hand over to Jeremy Craig from Testtakers and allow him to kind of talk to you a little bit more about the program that we've collaborated on, I wanted to just kind of talk to you a little bit from our perspective. What is the role of the SAT, the strategic testing timeline, which we've sort of shared in the past, and then getting some data alignment and understanding the goal of strategic personal development. So first and foremost, in the last couple of years, we've seen where the SAT has moved from being mandatory to being optional. And then during COVID, there were a lot of universities, most universities had to make it optional. But now that we're starting to emerge from COVID, we're in a situation where optional is a little bit more nuanced than it once was. And so the role of the SAT, certainly in applications to the US, coming from Asia, require our students to perform at quite a high level if they're going to submit an SAT score. But SAT still only plays a role within the total application. It is not the Gaokao, and it is not ever going to be the Gaokao. So, you know, obviously the primary piece is always going to be academics, and that's going to start with the IB scores and the IGCSE scores and the internal scores that our students gain and earn. And then second to that is going to be about their strategic personal development, you know, about being a holistic, well-rounded person. You know, if you've attended our previous sessions, then you know this acronym that we use: LID, leadership, impact, initiative, and dedication, and how the U.S. university lens is really focused on the community lens, and all of those pieces kind of fit together. Now, in the past, we've definitely recommended a strategic testing timeline to students and to parents, and we've talked about this very clearly. I think that it doesn't make sense to start testing too soon. And from our perspective and what the data shows, too soon is in year 11 or in year 10. And the reason why we've invited our year 11 parents to take part in this is so that you can hear this message not only from us, but also from Mr. Craig as well. So the recommended timeline for us is that students should actually not start testing until midway through their year 12, their first year of IB. And the reason for that is twofold. One is because IB grades are so important, we want to make sure that students get off to a really hot start with their IB. And second is that their IB subjects are actually going to support the preparation that they need in order to gain the knowledge to be successful on this test. So it's actually in their best interest to follow this timeline, which means that really the first test that a student should take with us, if it's based on our recommendation, is going to be the year 12 December test. But that would be a little bit early and probably not the best one because we don't want to be inundating students with test prep as they are finishing term one and registering those grades on their transcript for term one. So our best case scenario is actually that students' first test is in March, which is what this whole program is centered around. And I think that, you know, if you've been a parent with Dulwich for a long time, you know that we have not offered SAT prep in the past in-house. And anytime that we, you know, were asked to make a recommendation, the response you would have gotten from us was something like, we don't feel comfortable making a recommendation about a test prep company because we don't want to, you know, sort of be on the hook for the quality that you do or do not get out of that company. But what we understood is that if we're giving you a recommended timeline and we're not creating a pathway for you to follow on that timeline, then we're kind of leaving you to your own devices. And by leaving you to your own devices, it makes you susceptible to getting swept up by some of these education agencies who have a real hard time answering the two basic questions when it comes to test prep. And those two basic questions are, how much test prep is too much test prep, and how much testing is too much testing. And I think, unfortunately, most of the companies in the market are not going to have a maximum, because the more prep you do and the more testing you do, the more money they make. And unfortunately, that's the reality of the market. But what we wanted to do is go out and find the right partner, and that's what we believe we've done with Testtakers Singapore and with Jeremy Craig. And our goal really is to save our students from not only the high wage gouging test prep companies out there, and then getting swept into university counseling services that are not leading to support in their agency, which is key in their applications as well. But also, we want to save students from being a case where a student becomes a 300-hour summer SAT prep incident. I mean, there are victims out there that have gone through our school who have spent 300 hours in the summer on these programs, and I don't know what the cost is of them financially, but I can tell you that the cost of them in terms of that student's ability to improve both academically and in terms of being able to build out their profile is significantly impacted by just being in these rote programs. So that's why we're here tonight. That's why we've partnered with Jeremy and Testtakers, and I hope that you find that this is a very informative presentation. I'm going to hand over to Jeremy now, and Jeremy can talk you through a little bit more about Testtakers Singapore and his extensive experience as a test prep guru, and then also kind of to understand exactly what these programs are going to look like on the Suzhou and Shanghai campus in January. So thanks again, and over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Luke, for the kind introduction. Let me just lay out what I'm going to talk to you today about. This is going to be pretty quick and dirty because I want to get us through this as timely as possible. Most of the data about the SAT, about the new format, about the scoring and whatnot can also be found on my website, which will be at the end, and on numerous videos and webinars and whatnot that we've been producing over the last 20 years. All this is sort of backed up. But let me just talk a little bit about the intro to the digital SAT. Now, just to back up a little further, the SAT came out of a test that people going into the US Army took in the 1940s. So if you did well on the SAT, you ended up as someone's driver. If you didn't do well, you were the guy at the front of the boat that went over to France. That kind of developed after the war, and now it really is an impartial, not impartial, but it's a common yardstick where universities can look at how students compare among different systems. Honestly, if American high schools all did the IB, then there wouldn't be a reason for the SAT. The SAT is just one added metric that they've gotten used to having. We could get into test option and all that for hours and hours. Let's just keep it, like Luke said, for many students coming from Asian environments, having a strong SAT score is really not vital, but certainly advantageous when applying to the most rejected American universities. Now, the digital SAT has been available for about 1 year now internationally. It's rolling out in the States in 2024 in March. The test is computer adaptive. I'll talk more about that later. And by being computer adaptive, they'll be able to shorten down the length just a little bit over 2 hours. So it really is pretty quick and dirty. And the administration of it is much cleaner than it used to be. Students will take the test at a test center. The scores are still in the familiar range of 400 to 1600. And there will be a concordance. So a kid who scored a 1200 on the old test can expect to score 1200 on the new test. And they will be kind of varying things to make sure that that lines up properly. Most American universities, again, are technically test optional. They had to be. But among the top 50 schools, I've been working on this data, over 2/3 of people at the top 50 schools submitted SAT scores, and almost 85% who got into the top 10 submitted scores. So the test is still part of the admissions landscape. How is it delivered? Students will download a testing app onto their laptop. They will go to the test center on the appointed test day. They'll open up the app, put in a code on the screen, and that app will shut down the rest of the students' applications. Won't be able to go online, won't be able to do anything else other than just take the test. Okay, students will take the test for 2 hours and change. After that, the test gets submitted back to College Board, and then 2 weeks later, you get your results. Now, the advantage of this is that previously there was always a lot of faffing about at the start of the test to fill in the bubbles, am I in the right place, blah, blah, blah. This is you open up your computer, you hit start, you're good to go and off to the races. So whereas the SAT used to take 4 or 5 hours in some cases, now it's taking a little bit under 2.5 hours, and the test security is much enhanced. Let's just say that cheating on tests has been a problem in Asia for about 4,000 years. It's a problem around the world. But by having the test in a digital format, the test that one person is going to be taking is going to be subtly different from the test that the person next to them is going to be taking. Therefore, wandering eyes are going to result in lower scores. So that's one of the reasons for the new change. Now, test format, 2 reading writing sections, 10-minute break, 2 math sections, very familiar, okay? Performance on the first of the 2 section pairs determines which second section the students will get. The sections are now called modules. That's the word that we have for them. So it's imperative for students who want to score well that they do very, very well on the first module to kind of get into the second module, to get varsity, to get into that second module. And only by scoring well in the second module can students score over 600 or so. If you do poorly on the first module, your score is effectively capped in the high 5s. I have a little graphics to talk about that later. The other thing we're finding is that scoring is a little bit of a black box right now. We don't really know how it works because College Board isn't releasing any data. But if a student misses 1 or 2 easy math questions, they might score a 750. Whereas on the same test, if you miss 1 or 2 of the most difficult math tech questions, you might score a 790 or even a perfect 800. So the different questions have different weights depending on where they occur in the test and depending on the relative difficulty of those questions. So it's imperative for students to score well that they do well on the easy questions. The hard ones, great, but you want to make sure you don't make any dumb mistakes. And a lot of our system in Testtakers is about using test-taking techniques and strategies to mitigate those mistakes and obviously get a higher score in the end. One thing I will note also is the Desmos calculator tool, which is a very powerful graphing calculator tool, is now embedded in the College Board app. And a good 5th or 6th of the questions, using Desmos, students can just blunt force their way to the right answer. Rather than dealing with calculus and discriminants and things like that, you can just use Desmos to get to the right answer directly. And that's something that we cover very heavily in our program. Now, here's a little graphic about how the scoring works. In the first module, section 1, you're going to get a mix of easy, medium, and hard questions. If you do well, you go the green route. And then you're going to get a second module that's markedly harder than the first. If you do very well in the second module, then you, of course, can challenge for a maximum score of 800. And really, your minimum score, even if you fall asleep and don't answer any question in the second module, you're still going to score 400 something. Whereas if you don't do well enough in the first module to qualify the second harder module, you end up on the red route, which I should have made that the higher route for China, but the red route, which is going to be the lower scoring. So the maximum score then is really up around 580, and the minimum score is again 200. So long story short, it's imperative that you do well enough in the first module to get to the second harder module. Okay, that's very, very important, and it's one thing that makes the test adaptive. And by making it adaptive, you can make it shorter. So that's one of the key things that they did. Now, how to prep. Again, students who are in math club, who read Jane Austen for fun, and are really good at grammar, do really well on the SAT. That's just natural. So the natural prep for the SAT is what you're doing in school already. The SAT tests what people learn in school. So you want to read more, read magazines, read newspapers, read anything without too many pictures. Percy Jackson, just fine. Just read more is the important thing. Math, pay attention in math class, and make sure that your math foundation is strong. A lot of kids missed out a lot of stuff over COVID where their algebra and geometry skills might be kind of like buried a little bit. You want to make sure you remember how to do triangles. Those are important on the SAT. So a lot of what you're learning in IB math is far beyond what's on the SAT, and you have to kind of circle back and make sure that your bases are good. Khan Academy is a wonderful tool for math. It's also a wonderful tool for English grammar. But one thing that Luke alluded to earlier, doing SAT prep before you're in your first year of IB, I think for you guys that would be year 12, is really quite foolish. You're taking time away from all the other activities. You're taking time away from preparation for the IGSCs, which are vital. You're also taking time away from making the basketball team or doing any number of more important things. SAT scores will get better over time. A kid who would score a 1400 at the beginning of year 12 will score a 1470 at the end of year 12 without doing any targeted prep. And just doing SAT prep again and again and again is going to lead to a Sisyphean, let's look up that word later, a Sisyphean process where you're never really going to get where you want to be. And all that time is wasted that you could be working other more important aspects of your application and indeed your adolescent life. So regular schoolwork will help your SAT, and starting too early is something that I counsel against. I had a 9th grader just looking to start. I said, no, see me in 2 years. You really don't want to be doing anything until you're in the first year of IB. Okay, this is what I call the Craig curve. I've been doing this for way too long. I started teaching SAT prep in the early 90s while I was at university in New York at Columbia studying Chinese history, which is a wonderful topic, but not that useful in the professional life. So I found that after about 40 hours of prep, and this includes classroom learning and also homework, diminishing returns really kick in, and you don't get much more out of it. Students, their maximum score might be a 1450. If every student is capable of scoring a 1600 on the SAT, then nearly every student in Asia would have a 1600 on the SAT, and the test would mean nothing. To use a sporting analogy, it's close to my heart. I'm a rather good amateur golfer. I'm like at 6 handicap, but I'm never going to play on TV. Even if I practice every day, I get a little bit better, but frankly, I'm just not built to score, 4 under par regularly. It's not going to happen. Similarly, very few students are capable of getting a perfect SAT score, and our approach is to get you up to your possible score as quickly and efficiently as possible. You get that score, then you drop the mic and worry about all the other things that your application is going to be necessary for your application. That's the key thing. Now here is a schedule. This is Suzhou. This is Shanghai. They're remarkably similar. Okay, I don't know if you can put the cursor over week 1. These schedules are available on our website. You can look at them a little bit more later. Basically, week 1 is just taking a diagnostic test. We'll be proctoring that over Zoom or Teams or any number of other platforms. Week 2 is going to be me on the ground, returning to China after many years. I actually studied at Fudan University in 1990, if you can believe that, aging myself. I'm going to be on the ground in Suzhou from the 19th until the 21st. We'll be having classes on Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and Sunday afternoon. I find doing Sunday mornings, you need a little bit of a break. There's only so much the kids can absorb over a 3-day period, and 12 hours is about it. Following that, there is also going to be online sessions leading up to the March SAT test date that will be conducted by myself and my team in Singapore. Those are going to meet largely on Sunday afternoons and evenings leading up to the March test date, as well as the yellow covered spotlight sessions that are optional extra review sessions available at no extra charge that are going to be on Thursday evenings. Again, the schedule is a little confusing to look at, but there'll be a QR code at the end that will direct you to the bespoke website on my platform that will have full details on that. Any specific questions about the program, you can just email in. We're on email all the time. So that's the program in Suzhou. And then the following weekend, I get to go to Shanghai Pudong, and we're going to be doing a program at Dulwich Pudong that will meet the following weekend. But again, those Zoom sessions later on will be the same dates. If we have more people, then we split those into multiple sections. That's easy to do on Zoom or any other platform that we have. And again, this leads up to the March SAT test date. If you're not taking the test until August or May or June, you shouldn't really take this program. The idea being to go in, prep, not that hard, but reasonably aggressively, take the test in March, because then in April, May, and June, you have your year-end exams. And year-end exams are frankly much more important than the SAT. So you want to get in, get a good result on the books. If you're going to take the test again, maybe look to take in August. And that way you have the summer to play with. But like Luke said, don't do 300 hours of SAT prep over the summer, some hagwon in Seoul. Bad idea. Okay, bad idea. I take my summers largely off because you shouldn't really be doing much SAT prep during the summer. The total cost for this program is $850. I think I have, $850. So this is just more what I spoke about earlier. I was getting ahead of myself. For that, you get a full course pack with all the course notes. You also get a flashcard box. The flashcard box has English vocabulary. You can't really see English vocabulary, grammar, and math. hopefully you're going to get this before the holiday, if possible. I'll just DHL it up to you. And of course, you also get a special pencil that has a measuring device for use on the SAT. Again, I've been doing this since '93. I've taught over 350 SAT prep programs over the years. The focus has always been on SAT prep only. I know a lot about the university admissions process, but that is on the teams at the school. Okay, I don't want to get involved in that. And that's one of the reasons why we enjoy very close partnerships with with scores of schools around the world. We work very closely with World College and Tanglewood in Singapore, and we're recently been working with schools in Switzerland. And we have a large network in Southeast Asia that continues to expand as we get out of the COVID mess. And that is pretty much my quick and dirty take on things. So I guess any questions you can just put into the chat box, or Luke or Hyuk, is there anything else you think I should talk about?
Yeah, I think is a good time to take questions. We can just have those questions fielded through the chat. I don't know. I mean, this QR takes us directly to the website, right? So we can see the overview of the program.
I take you to the website with the schedules and more information. In terms of our track record, our average improvement on the new digital SAT is about 180 points. Now, a kid coming in with a 1400, you're probably not going to get to 1580. So I say 1540 might be a good target, but the kid coming in with 1100 can expect to maybe improve 200 points or more. So diminishing returns kick in. It gets harder to improve the higher up you are in the scoring table. And I like to think that most universities know that there's not much difference between a 1520 and a 1540, that as long as you're in that kind of range, then it's like tick on the box and they start looking at all the other factors.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any questions coming in through the chat. I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, I know you've done some pretty interesting research diving into the common data sets, and you've published some of that stuff on LinkedIn. Is there anything there that you would want to share that would be relevant?
I'm coming out. I'm actually my newsletter will be going out tomorrow to advisors. One version goes out to advisors. One version goes out to students and families in Singapore. I took the top 200 schools by admit rate, and I stripped out University of California. I stripped out your Georgetowns and stuff that require the test. And the big takeaway is, of the 200 schools that are the most rejected, and that's anywhere from 5% admit rate all the way down to 90%. Over half the students that are enrolled in those schools submitted SAT, ACT scores. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule. There's your Reed colleges of the world that 4% submit, but there's also a lot of the big publics, like Kansas State. I think it's like 90% submit. So what we're seeing is that while test optional looks great, universities really want to see that score. The challenge is, if University A all of a sudden pulls a Georgetown and says, you know what, we're going to start accepting, we start requiring SAT scores, then what has to happen is their number of applications might actually go down. And that is sort of deadly for some departments. So it's very brave to stick your neck out and try that. See, one question just came in about UK universities and the SAT. I think Luke and Hyuk speak to this better in your context. Yeah.
Yeah, I just responded.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the exception is if a kid's doing American APs and applying to UK schools, they still want to see the SAT. One thing I'm finding is actually a lot of schools in Europe, IE University in Spain and also Boccini, they have their own in-house admissions test. But if you have an SAT score, they'll look at that in lieu of taking their silly test. So you can have that as like a mark as well.
We've also seen where students who are on the IB, not on the full IB diploma, but are on IB courses or IB certificates program, depending on how you refer to it, use that in combination with their high school diploma with an SAT in order to be competitive. But that's not something we see going to the UK. We do see that with Australia. And really US is the most useful place, although Korea is also interested in SAT scores if they're good.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding of the SAT among schools in the UK, that they just look at SAT scores from kids in the American system and don't look at anything else, which is crazy. How about Singapore universities? That's a very good question. Singapore universities don't even know what they want. And it seems to change every year. The best thing to do with Singapore universities is to get in a dialogue with an admissions officer, ask that specific question, get a direct response, take that email, laminate it, and put it in a safe deposit box for referring to later, because it's very, very, very possible that they're going to change their policy in another 6 months. Singapore universities, again, I've been in Singapore for 23 years now. Singapore universities are primarily set up to educate Singaporeans. And to getting in not on that Singapore junior college route is not impossible, but they make it certainly harder than if you were in school at Anglo-Chinese Junior College. So the key thing with Singapore universities, there's 5 of them now, they're world class, but make sure that you get a firm answer from someone with some authority, not just someone who told you something at an event. You get it in writing, because NUS, for instance, has 3 or 4 different policies depending on which school you're applying to. It becomes very complicated. Okay, all right. So yeah, actually, one thing that just came in now is on my newsletter. A number of schools, and something that Luke and Hyuk, you get to deal with later. A number of schools now are over 60% ED. So they're filling up 60% of their seats via ED. That's the big news of the day. I think Tulane's up to 75% are being accepted ED. So, okay, SAT, ACT, that's a good one. SAT, ACT, Coke and Pepsi, rugby league, rugby union. A kid that scores well on one would score well on the other. It really comes down to access. Now, Luke, your schools are SAT test centers. Are they also ACT test centers?
Shanghai is a test center for both, but Suzhou is an SAT only.
Okay, yeah. It comes down to availability, and SAT shorter. It's 2.25 hours, ACT 3 hours. There's all kinds of arguments for and against both. I could debunk any of them. I would say the SAT is easier to gain, easier to improve upon. The ACT is more, you know the answer, you don't. Okay, there's one question I can answer quickly. The cost is $850 US inclusive of everything. We'd have no hidden charges, and there's a 10% discount for registration and payment before this coming weekend. Payment can be done via credit card, or I think I can even do Alipay and WeChat Pay. The difference, different levels altogether. What we need to do out of necessity while I'm on the ground, unless we have 30 kids, I'll bring another teacher with me and we'll split them by ability. But probably the weekends in Suzhou and Shanghai, everyone will be together. But on the Zoom sessions following, the class sizes will be smaller, probably just 5 or 6 students each. And I have the teaching resources that we would effectively put the kids where they should be in terms of grouping them by ability based on their performance on diagnostic tests 1 and 2. Okay. Someone's on a train. The modern world. Things are going to start roughly the second week of January. What the weekend is? January 13th 19th would be the first diagnostic test, but that's something you take by yourself. And then the course race starts in earnest the following week in Suzhou on the 19th of January.
I think the only other thing that maybe we didn't talk about was the minimum and maximum that we would have in a particular class. Do you want to speak to that, Jim?
I would say we'll need 4 or 5 warm bodies to get me on a plane. And other than that, I find that a good class size is actually like 12 to 14 students. You get a good class dynamic. Anything larger than that, I'd probably look to bring my man Kevin with me, who's a wonderful teacher who works for me here in Singapore, and then we split the kids by ability. Yeah, outside kids are tricky because of safeguarding security. It's always a big issue. I'm dealing with that in Switzerland now. It's insurance, am I right? Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other piece is we just want to make sure that this is exclusive for our kids. I mean, you know, it's very possible. We had 50 people register for this call. So it's very possible that we're close to maxing things out already, and we want to make sure that our kids get the best of the best.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, all that we really do at Testtakers is SAT prep. We've done ACT in the past. We've gone away from that because the test isn't really sat in Singapore. We've done some other things for younger kids. The SSAT, if you're familiar with that dumpster fire of a test. But our main thing is SAT prep, and we stick to our lane and do not do university advising. That's not something again, I'm very knowledgeable in that area, but I chose long ago to leave that to the schools, and that way we can have really great partnerships with the schools. And you all are very, very well served by the teams up in China.
Well, I think we're at our time right now. I don't see any other questions coming through, so I think if there's any other questions that y'all have that you wanna feed through to us, you can feed through to either myself or Hyuk, or to Jeremy directly, depending on what your question is. Maybe you want to send it to all of us. But in any case, this recording will be available. So if you missed anything, you can kind of come back to it. And we're gonna be tight on our time. And we started at 4:30, and we're gonna end at 5. So thank you all.
Okay.
And have a great Friday, everyone.
Okay, and my email I just put on there. It's all over my website, and also LinkedIn. I'm making a bit of an effort also. Okay, thank you. Hope to see all of you in cold Shanghai. Okay, 再见，拜拜。
再见。